Right. Good morning, everybody, and welcome to NAUA's May service. The North American Unitarian Association is a member service organization dedicated to supporting and promoting the practice of liberal religion by embracing freedom, reason, and tolerance, rooted in our commitment to the inherent worth and dignity of every person and all peoples. I'm going to keep the announcements this morning as short as I can because I think we have a full program this morning. Most of the information, all the information that you might want to find, you can find on the website, which is naunitarians.org. The main tabs to look for are the program tabs, upcoming events, and communications. The programs tab will take you to information on events, worship. We have several circles. There's a book club and the International Alliance when it's active. Upcoming events, self-explanatory. When our academy is running, it's on hiatus for the summer. You'll find events for academy programs there under upcoming events. And under communications is where you'll find copies of the Liberal Beacon, the current copy, as well as past issues, and the Compass newsletter, which comes out twice a month, and which is where I'm pulling the announcements from. And also, I just noticed this morning up on the communications tab are slides from the recent communications workshop. I've heard so many good things about people who attended that I think that's probably worth checking out. The main thing that I want to mention is that we have some committees, two in particular, maybe three, that are looking for volunteers. We have a member services committee. And one of their activities is to help support new congregations and fellowships, and also to support and facilitate regional small groups so that you can actually find in person people in your geographical region. And they're looking for support and for volunteers to help organize and possibly lead some of those groups. And you can reach them at member-services at naunitarian.org. And I must say, I am confused about when it is NA Unitarians with an S and when it's just NA Unitarian. So if you try one and it doesn't work, add or remove the S as needed. Another group that's looking for volunteers is the Summit Committee, particularly with technical help. This year it's going to be an all Zoom committee, an all Zoom summit. So there's going to be some stresses on the system, and they're going to need some help doing everything we can to prevent that. Let's see. They're also looking for any information for ideas for workshops or panel discussions or icebreakers or anything else that you think would be a good addition to the summit plan. And I think, yes, here we go. The NAUA programs is looking for a volunteer film editor. It would involve light editing, and then linking the video of past services to the website and to social media. They're at communication@unitarians.org. And the summit committee is, I'm not finding it quickly, so you can find that on the website. Sorry about that. We have two active circles. One is by registration only, and that's the NAUA Forum Circle. The next one is at May 18th, and it's a discussion group. On May 18th, the subject will be what's good and bad about foreign aid, and how can aid be usefully reformed. So if you're interested in participating in that one, you need to sign up for it, and that will be under the programs tab on the website. And then the other one is open. It's sort of a drop-in situation. And it is called the NAUA Conversation/Discussion Circle. No reservation required. The next one will be on June 4th. And the link, there's a Zoom link in the Compass newsletter, but it is https://tinyurl.com/NAUA-circle. And I think I'll leave it at that so that we can get on with the program. Can I remind everybody, please mute your audio? Thank you.
Hello, everyone. I'm Joyce Kinnear, and I have our chalice for today. We're going to light it, however, in our imagination, because I don't have anything here with me where I'm visiting someone. But we light our chalice as a symbol of the light within us and the life that flows through the world around us. Thank you.
May nothing evil cross this door, and may ill fortune never cry above these windows. May the roar and rain go by. By faith made strong, the rafters will withstand the battering of the storm. This heart, though all the world grow chill, will keep you warm. He shall walk softly through these rooms, touching our lips with holy wine, till every casual corner glooms into a shrine. With laughter crown the rockets shout, and though these sheltering walls are thin, may they be strong to keep hate out and hold love in.
Hey, that was lovely, and I hope that you are all ready to listen to and engage with our guest speaker today, who most of you know. The Reverend Dr. Todd Eklof has been a minister of the Unitarian Universalist Church of Spokane, Washington since 2011, and has been president of the NAUA board since 2023. Eklof has 2 undergraduate degrees, one in philosophy and the other in communications, as well as the master's degree in religious studies, and is a doctor of ministry. He is the founder of NAUA and the author of the Gadfly Papers, 3 Inconvenient Essays by One Pesky Minister from 2019. I know we all look forward to hearing from Reverend Dr. Todd Eklof.
Thank you, Joyce, and thanks everyone for being here. It's always an honor to be with you. I'm going to first of all see if I can, if I remove the spotlight for myself, Roy, feel free to put it back up. I prefer to be able to see the larger crowd for myself. Otherwise, I'm speaking to myself. So hopefully this won't mess things up. Is everybody, am I still spotlighted for everyone else? Oh, good. Okay, so now I can see a good number of you. And I realized that I didn't have the order of service in front of me, so I was supposed to give some opening words which I didn't do at the start of the service, obviously. I'm going to give those today right now because they're kind of brief, and this is actually one of my favorite statements from the back of the Singing the Living Tradition hymnal. This is from Reverend Kathleen Mateague, who's actually the daughter of the woman who married Bill Houth, who was the minister here for many years in Spokane. Anyway, she went on to become just coincidentally a Unitarian minister herself, even though she wasn't raised by Bill. But this needs to be familiar. We come together today to remind one another to rest for a moment on the forming edge of our lives, to resist the headlong tumble into the next moment. I think that's just an amazing phrase, to resist the headlong tumble into the next moment until we claim for ourselves awareness and gratitude, taking the time to look into one another's faces and see their communion, the reflection of our own eyes. This community of laughter and silence, memory and hope is hallowed by our presence together. And I do have some closing words, so remind me when I need to do those, if you will. But yeah, I like having occasionally these conversations with Todd, and I haven't done one with NAUA yet, where I just kind of open it up to field questions. I don't like to respond to questions that are, like church businessy or NAUA business, if you will, stuff that's better reserved for annual meetings and board meetings, those sort of things. We're here for, I would say perhaps loftier purposes today, to contemplate the meaning of life, to consider the ways the world suffers, the ways we might be able to help, those bigger questions, to uphold our values. I like to call these worship services because the root of the word worship is worth. And rather than seeing it, as many do, as an humbling of ourselves, of prostrating ourselves before something, a belief in some entity that is greater than us, that it is the opportunity, like in the movie The Lion King, where when the cub is born, they raise that cub up, and the whole tribe of animals bends down and praises this miracle of life and this entity that has entered the world. So for me, that is what worship is. It is an opportunity for us to raise up, to lift up the matters that are of most importance and concern to us. So that's why I'm here today. So yeah, I think we'll just kind of see. Odell, were you going to sort of orchestrate the questions for us?
Actually, there's a couple elements of the order of service that we'll do before we start taking questions.
Oh, okay.
But I would suggest for people, if you have a question for Todd, you can put it in the chat. We can start to curate those, and then we'll go from there. I think that might be the easiest way. To start with, however, I do have a very short reading. I was thinking of this as sort of a good way to remind us all of it's the preamble to the Constitution, and I think it's a good summary of what America was meant to be and why we were created, and hopefully, or not created, but you know what I mean, why the Union was created, and to help us focus. And it's just got some good words. So we, the people of the United States, in order to form a more perfect union, establish justice, ensure domestic tranquility, provide for the common defense, promote the general welfare, and secure the blessings of liberty to ourselves and our posterity, do ordain and establish this Constitution for the United States of America. And with that, I will unspotlight myself. I think Doug has some music for us, and then when the music's done, we'll be back to question time. So. Thanks for that, Doug. That was really beautiful. So we have one question so far from Dick Burkhart. Law and order used to be a conservative dog whistle. It seems that we now need to reclaim it as our own. Some are even saying we need to reclaim the U.S. flag to support the U.S. Constitution. What do you think about that?
Well, that's a really great question. I mean, I certainly think we should be a law and order society. That is a liberal principle that came out of the Enlightenment, and that is foundational to what it means to be liberal, to recognize that nobody is above the law and that we need to have law and order as a society. So I'm certainly for claiming that as liberals, the type of society we want. I think the bigger and better question is the latter part of that is regarding our patriotism towards any country. I won't assume that everybody here is. In fact, I can see some folks from Canada, and so not everybody is a U.S. citizen. But even Canada, perhaps egged on by Trump's terrific war, have adopted or moved towards the slogan of Canada first. So I think this is the greater mistake with nationalism. I did a sermon last Sunday. I would encourage you, if you're interested, to go back and watch it or get the transcript offline. Occasionally, I rework a sermon that the great John Dietrich, who was the minister at the church here in Spokane between 1911 and 1916, went on to become a signer of the Humanist Manifesto and is known as the father of religious humanism. He gave a sermon on nationalism and internationalism. I do this occasionally, and this one was just beautiful timing for what we're going through as a world. But what I really liked is his distinction between nationalism and cosmopolitanism, or internationalism, I should say, and cosmopolitanism. While he's an internationalist, he really frowned upon the idea of cosmopolitanism, because cosmopolitanism indicates that you are without a country. You're sort of advocating for a world where there are no countries. Kind of a John Lennon-esque, right? Imagine there's no countries. But he says, we really can't help being part of the place we're from, the culture we're from, relating most to the people that we're with, and to own that and appreciate it, but to never believe that our nation or our national identity is more important than our connection to humanity as a whole. So I think it was really an eye-opener for me that we really need nations. We can't be international if we don't have nations, because international needs nations to have those relationships. It's this idea of let's make America great again. Well, America represents now less than 4.3% of the world population. If you're a decent human being, no matter where you're from, you recognize it would be utterly selfish for us to make ourselves great at the expense of others, just as it would be utterly selfish for Canada to focus on itself first at the expense of others. Not saying that doing what it must internally to take care of itself isn't valuable, but the problem comes when we realize that before we are part of a place, in a specific community, in a specific family, we are part of a species. And we should exist as nations for the benefit of the world. And that's a liberal principle that is called the humanistic ethic, where everything we do as a society should be to benefit human welfare and individual flourishing or individual unfolding. So I think, we should be able to feel good about being Americans or being Canadians or wherever we're from. But essentially, where we are from is where we were born, which is an accident of circumstances. And that place is no more, the people in that place are no more human than people in other places. So I think this frees us to honor a level of devotion to our countries that I think would make a lot of that most Americans on whatever side of the political lines would appreciate, and yet also without going to the point where we want to go at war with the rest of the world just to make our country great. And by the way, that never works, not in a globalized society. We see it in Brexit, the aftermath of Brexit, for example. They're financially, economically, workforce, everything is worse in the UK than it was before Brexit. So we're part of an international community. We're one human species, and we need to fundamentally act like that, and then enjoy the things that make us us as individuals.
Let's see here. Okay, and I apologize. There was a question from Carol Reich that I missed. I believe that my creative writing, a unity friend, and discussions have led me to a growing and mystical direction that is freeing. Just wanted to share that belonging and belonging to self can be a fun, lifelong journey. And I think she wants your reflections on that idea.
Yeah. Hi, Carol. Were you wanting to clarify something? I see your hand up. Or yeah. Well, yeah.
I was going to say, I'm in a Four Agreements group right now, which many of us have read many times, and I think your remarks just reflected on that. I found unity a few years ago out of desperation, having left a church you know of, and I found that creative writing brought me to a new place. And my friend in Unity sent an abstract on mysticism. And these folks did research on mysticism, and they brought together the idea that mystics are in all faiths, all practices. And so I found that very intriguing and helpful. And if anybody is curious about that article, I could send it. It's actually 25 years old. But I think that your ideas about creativity and you creating a new frame has really brought a lot of people to a better place. So that's just part of what I was thinking.
Well, thank you. It reminds me of a book I read years ago on it was can't even remember the title now. It was about a Westerner who went to Japan to study Zen Buddhism, and he had an experience where a bunch of American priests and American mystics, monks, I guess I'd say, went to study or be with, and sort of a cultural exchange with the Japanese priest and the Japanese monks. And the priest ended up really just arguing. They couldn't understand each other. They would talk about their different ideas, and there was just a lot of ideological conflict between them. But the monks, who have the mystical tradition of both sides, understood each other immediately and were just able to sit quietly and contemplate with one another, right? So it's a very different approach to living. I think that Unitarianism is fundamentally a mystical tradition because it asks us to constantly question ourselves, question our beliefs, so that we can be open to growth, but also open to others. And that is a particular type of mysticism that's called apophatic mysticism, which gets at truth by cutting away what we already know, right? So you look at it as more like a wood carver or a stone cutter, where you're chipping away at something to find the truth within it. The thing is, in mysticism, you just keep on, you always chip. But mystics like Meister Eckhart said, if you want to know what God is absolute nothing, right? Those sort of comments. Reach for it, can't be grasped. Look for it, can't be seen. Listen for it, can't be heard. The name that can be named is not the name in Taoism. And I think it's really important for us as human beings to learn to be comfortable with not knowing, and to learn to be comfortable with not being know-it-alls. Unfortunately, for the past decades, our Western society has gotten to the point where the only model of interaction, ideological interaction, is one of warfare, where we have a right to ad hominem attack those that we disagree with, to become angry, and to call people names, and to silence them and be unfair and all those sort of things. And I see this, this has happened. Obviously, the UUA has taken this approach to dissenters, but I see it even in my own congregation here. I see it present in NAUA oftentimes. It's just this sort of thing that's in the greater ethos of our societies right now, that it's okay for us to beat each other up if we disagree, and that we should feel threatened when our ideas are challenged, and we should protect them at all costs, rather than to be open to exploring whether or not we've completely grasped the truth or not. And traditionally, this is the approach that has allowed Unitarians to stand out, right? That we have been able to come together despite our differences, and love each other, and work together, and focus on the things that the issues that are most important to us. And what you believe really wasn't that, well, let's just not talk about our differences. No, talk about them. We don't really care, because that's not what we're about. We're not really about figuring out what the ultimate truth is and forcing everybody to believe it. And the whole world right now has gone back to a rather primitive belief that if we have one idea, if we could only force one idea, the right idea, the true idea, which just so happens to be my idea, always, right, on everybody else, then we will establish peace on earth. Because everybody will think the same way. It never works. It only results in hostility and division. So this is why Unitarians, I think, are here in this world. And it is the message and the example that we should be giving. It is the greater purpose of us collectively in NAUA, in the UUA, throughout the world. This is this is the gift that Unitarians have to give, is to show that there's another way to be together in community. And I think that is rooted in that mystical tendency, characteristic, quality that is part of liberalism.
Okay, I have a question from Kent Clostrike. How can we just make neutral words neutral again? All of them. Tolerance, diversity, all of them.
I'm not sure I understand the question. Do you mind maybe can clarify it for me a little bit? What do you mean by neutral?
Well, I almost mean when you hear some of the power words or buzzwords, that should be the reaction. What do you mean? Like, I guess that's one of my many campaigns in life, is to make words like that. Like tolerance is the classic one. You don't want to tolerate the intolerable. And that goes to a certain place in people's minds that I don't necessarily mean, but I just mean, the buzzwords are well, they're monotonous, and they're just not, they don't seem to be serving our purpose as well as a society. So again, it's just a bit of my campaign, so I'm just looking for other people's ideas on.
Well, I think you just answered
Yeah.
it for all of us, Ken.
Okay.
We have to clarify what we mean, right? So I
Yeah.
work really hard. I work really hard to clarify the word tolerance. It is in particular the word I get most pushback from liberals, right? And it's not because they don't think we should be tolerant. They do, but they don't think it goes far enough, right? That we really should embrace one another. We should love one another. These sort of higher minded words or concepts. And I'm okay with that. I mean, love is something that needs to be defined as well and understood. I won't go into that here. But the thing about tolerance, right? If you understand the history of that word, it was once a crime to utter during the Middle Ages in particular, because it was akin to calling for anarchy. And it goes back to this sort of intuitive but false concept that if everybody believed the same thing, we would be at peace. Because for some reason we want to fight over our ideas, our idea of truth. And so if we were a society that allowed a diversity of opinions, we would be at constant war. So the call for tolerance was considered a call for anarchy, and in some cases it was a crime that could get you locked away or even put to death. And it wasn't until the 100 years of religious wars that preceded the Renaissance, in which there was such brutality, and there was no way to force the ideas back into the box. There was no way to effectively ban books and the spread of ideas because of the printing press. So it was finally then that some people said, well, maybe we should give this tolerance thing a shot, because we've tried everything else and none of us can continue with this brutality and bloodshed. And to our pride, I think the Unitarians were the first to really formally do it. It worked until for a very short time. King Sigismund, of course, died early, and the Catholics moved in, and they basically got rid of that the Edict of Torda. And it wouldn't be until the Enlightenment, when the ideas that began in the Renaissance as mostly just ideas began to be put into place, that tolerance, religious freedom, freedom of expression, these ideas came to the fore again. But I think the idea of what we're getting at was really Dr. King said really well when he said the law can't make a man love me, but it can prevent him from lynching me. And I think that's pretty important too. So this is really what tolerance is. In my opinion, tolerance is supposed to just be a social expectation, and there should be laws in place to enforce a certain level of tolerating one another, so that if I disagree with Muslims and some Muslims move in next door, I don't harass them or burn their house down or whatever the case might be. They get to be there even if we disagree. And this is what society is based on, saying, let's put some rules in place so that we don't kill each other or discriminate against each other over our differences, particularly over our ideological differences. And what happens is, and this is what happened during the integration movement to integrate schools, because I was in school when that happened, it worked. Eventually. I mean, at first, our parents were teaching us as little kids to hate each other, to dislike each other. But as we grew in the same neighborhoods, in the same schools, on the same streets, we couldn't help but befriend one another. And from there, we learned to love one another and to trust one another. And because the circle was expanded and to humanize one another. And it was that same generation that eventually elected Barack Obama, the first African-American president. When I was a kid, if you'd have said there will be a Black president within my lifetime, I would have said that's impossible. But within just the changes from that requirement for us to tolerate one another in our own communities, a transformation took place. So we'll get to the love, we'll get to the higher minded stuff. But the basic thing, and it's not hard, is live and let live, right? This is a statement that comes out of warfare, right? That when you see the futility of warfare and the loss, the soldiers come back and they say, let's just live and let live.
Okay, we have one from Jim Anderson. What do you see NAUA doing, and where do you see NAUA being in the next few years?
Well, that's a good question, Jim. I ponder it a lot. I would love to see NAUA truly come to reflect our liberal religious heritage by being fully aware of where we come from and what we're supposed to be about. Some of the things I've been talking about today. I want it to enable for the first time our liberal religion not only to survive, but to thrive. And what I mean by thrive is to become a force for good in the world. That we are not, even before I was ever at odds with the UUA, early on, I used to say, UUA treats our churches like they're hospice workers, right? We're not going to grow. We're a dying religion. So let's just make ourselves comfortable before we go, And I don't think that's what we should be. We should have be a force for good in the world, a force for reminding people of the values that are theirs, the values that are humanity's ideals, that we just happen to lift up as we worship together in our different ways. And in fact, as we're in the process of creating a strategic plan for NAUA right now, and that was one of the pieces I requested that we put in is that in addition to continuing to build the foundation and taking care of the organization itself, let's put something in there about doing something for the world, something bigger and beyond NAUA. And that is what I hope NAUA will become. I do have some concerns, not that NAUA will necessarily not survive the, whatever's going on with the UUA and whatnot, or that it won't survive as a religious association. I think it can do that. I do have concerns that a lot of people want to slip back into the behaviors and mindset that got the UUA into the situation that it did. And I find myself pushing back against that a lot. I don't know if I'll be able to hold it at bay because I won't be in leadership at the NAUA forever. That's not how I want to spend the last part of my life, if you will. I want to get it on a firm foundation. And that means we build from the bottom up. We don't start with the penthouse or the steeple, whichever metaphor you prefer, and then build underneath it. So it needs patience. So I'm concerned that those forces might take it in a illiberal direction or put it in a place where it eventually makes the same mistakes the UUA did. And the other thing, I'm really big into the idea of the evolution of technology. Some of you who've heard me speak know how much I believe that's happening, whether we like it or not, whether we are enthusiastic about it or not. I don't know what the next 15 years are going to hold. There's going to be such dramatic changes, I believe, in how we relate to one another, in our powers as beings, that we will become unrecognizable. And the question will be really, will any religion make sense at that point? And I'm not talking far in the future. I'm talking about changes that we're undergoing right now, and that will only escalate and probably within the next decade be so noticeable as to make us wonder about many of the institutions that have been part of our lives for so long. So I think that is perhaps the greater force that would work against our continued existence, for better or for worse.
Well, I hate to say it, but I think we have way more questions than we're going to be able to get to in this time frame. So I'm hoping that some of these other questions, if we don't get to your question, maybe it can be part of the discussion after the service. So I might pick and choose a little bit. I saw one from Bob Simone that I thought would be a good one to discuss. He says, I gave a sermon last month about life after death and discussed examples of people who as children had vivid memories of lives from people who had died well before they were born, which to some is proof that consciousness can survive the death of the body. What are your thoughts about this possibility?
Well, that's that I'll go to my mystical side, right? I don't know, and that's usually what I say at a memorial service at conclusion, that we don't know. What we do understand about reality is that everything that has ever existed still exists, right? Even when the universe, let's say, began, for lack of a better word, 14-ish billion years ago, everything was, squished into a small particle of, and then began to expand, and we're still in that expansion. It wasn't really a big bang. It was an unfolding, and the unfolding is still occurring, and everything is colliding and crashing and spinning out of control. It's just on such large scales that we can exist on a planet and not notice that we're in the middle of an explosion. But the question of life after death, I think, is one that we won't know, if we know, until we die. Now, there may be some science that comes around eventually that will help us understand these phenomena. Having said that, I will say that there have been enough reports of ghosts and people seeing their loved ones when they're on their deathbed, these sort of things, that make it difficult for me to think that there isn't something to that. And I'll tell you one story. I've had experiences myself, when I was much younger, and they make me believe something is out there. But one of the ones that really had an impact on me, it wasn't my experience, but a couple of years ago, one of our members came. I hadn't seen her for a while, and this is a person who's incredibly down to earth, not out there at all, just an earthy sort of, horse riding farm girl. And she said, well, it's been a tough week.
Don't wear shoes in the house.
She said, my husband's brother was killed in a car accident, very close. And his two boys were trapped in the car, and he was deceased up front before they could come and rescue him. And his boys were little guys, 4, 5, 6 years old, if I remember right. So it was absolutely terrible. And I said, I'm so sorry. This is so horrible. She says, yeah. She says, there's a weird thing though. The police came to his wife's door and knocks on the door and said, I'm gonna give a fake name here just in case, they wouldn't want this to be known. But said, hey, we're looking for Jasper. And she says, Jasper? She says, yeah, we're looking for Jasper. Jasper was on the scene, even though he was also in the car, and he was sitting in the back with the boys, keeping them calm. The boys told us Jasper was here keeping us calm while we were waiting to be rescued. And so they said, but Jasper wasn't on the scene. We need to get a statement as to what happened. And she said, Jasper's their grandfather. He's been dead for years. They never even met their grandfather. Now, I can't hear something like that, especially from a person like this who, is not out there in the least, and not believe that that is true. I can't explain it. I don't know what it means, but it has implications. But what I do believe is that when we lose the things we love, when things change, when we lose our minds, and by the way, we all have already lost most of our minds, right? We can't remember much of anything that's ever happened to us. In fact, if those who can, it's a debilitating illness, right? To have every memory. So if remembering our experiences is who we are, then we've lost a lot of ourselves along the way. But I do think that whatever happens next is that we remain in some form, whether we are just part of the particles that make up existence that shift into new forms. But that gets more speculative than we need to. So I hope that answers the question, Bob. It doesn't answer it. It just gives my feedback as to.
Yeah, all I was asking was for your opinion, and you gave us that, Todd. So thanks.
Thank you. Thank you.
All right, I think we'll do one more question, and I do apologize to everybody whose questions won't get answered.
It's my fault. I'm very long-winded.
That's okay. So there's one from Doug Rogers. If we think about how we belong to many groups, starting with our closest family and friends, all the way up to the world community, the question remains whether there is something beyond. Do we need a concept of belonging to something beyond ourselves as humans? Do we need God?
Yeah, my direct answer is kind of a yes. Well, it's kind of a yes and no. I mean, no, I don't think we need God. Yes, I think we need something greater than ourselves. And that, it was sort of my issue with, well, let me back up. There's an old anecdote that is probably not true, where Henry David Thoreau has been arrested for not paying taxes, and his friend Ralph Waldo Emerson comes to the jail to visit him and says, Henry, what are you doing in there? And of course, Thoreau says, Waldo, what are you doing out there? So you have these two versions of transcendentalism, what I call vertical and horizontal transcendentalism. The vertical transcendentalism is Emerson's idea that we are connected through this oversoul, which to me is just another, though broader version of an idea of God. And that we connect with that vertically, right? We as individuals can connect to something broader than ourselves. But the Thoreauian version, to me, of transcendentalism, at least through this anecdote, is horizontal, right? We become more than ourselves by expanding into the world around us. So caring for the environment, caring for other creatures on the planet, caring for all beings and all people on the planet is transcendentalism. And that allows us to be bigger than ourselves by connecting with others through genuine love, which is the only power that human beings really have. It's our greatest power. And love is really defined as this desire to take responsibility for, to know, to understand, to care for others, and to do our part to help them grow and become all that they can be. And that to me is enough. So I think that's probably the best we can do today. I am long-winded. I never get to most of the questions that people have. So maybe we'll do this again sometime, but really appreciate you letting me ponder and wonder with you today and in the days and years ahead.
Thank you very much, Todd. I think everyone appreciates your long-windedness. Thank you for sharing your insights with us. I'm gonna transfer over now to the closing music from Doug.
There is
Thank you for that wonderful music, Doug. Todd, did you have closing words?
I do, yes. So I want to preface these if I can. This is a benediction. I was heading to the airport to fly to Colorado to speak at a church there, and at the last minute they asked if I would be willing to do a benediction. I don't do the benedictions usually. A lay leader does, and I walk to the back of the service to greet people. So I really quickly asked ChatGPT to come up with a benediction. So I cheated. But the thing I love about artificial intelligence is it knows I'm a Unitarian, and so it takes all the ideas of Unitarianism and funnels them into a mathematical answer, if you will, that makes sense. And so I would say this wasn't really written by AI, it was written by us, right? This is AI's interpretation of what our values are, what we're about. And I think you'll find it really beautiful. May we depart from this sacred gathering with hearts open and minds receptive. As we navigate the paths of our diverse beliefs and perspectives, let us remember the strength that comes from embracing the richness of our differences. In honoring our shared humanity, let us also honor the value of those whose views may stand in contrast to our own. May we find the courage to listen deeply, to engage thoughtfully, and to seek common ground where understanding can flourish. In a world that often seeks to divide, may we be the bearers of compassion, recognizing the inherent worth of every individual. As we go forth into the world, may our interactions be guided by respect, empathy, and a commitment to bridge the gaps that separate us. May we be reminded that in the tapestry of our collective existence, each thread contributes to the beauty of the whole. Let us carry this spirit of unity and diversity with us, nurturing a world where love, understanding, and acceptance thrive. May our hearts be open, our actions kind, and our intentions rooted in the shared quest for truth and harmony. Amen, blessed be, and may our journey continue in the light of mutual respect.
Let's remember that we are not alone until we light this flame together next time. Thank you. Go in peace.
Okay, we had set aside some time as an idea to have a general discussion of maybe 15 to 20 minutes or so before we go into breakout rooms. Do you have time for that, Todd? Does that sound good?
Yeah, sure.
Okay. So this is another opportunity for people to ask questions. I guess maybe instead of the chat format, you want to raise your hand and we'll call on people? You could ask your question yourself.
And I
So we
think
have one from
Odell,
Jim and Linda.
I'll just keep the recording going. Then usually we stop it at this point in case people don't want to be identified. Should I stop it at this point or just continue on while Reverend Todd's taking more questions, I guess?
Sure, let's continue.
Okay.
There's no
Okay.
objections. Yeah, it looks like,
Okay,
is
Jim?
it Linda? Or
Yes,
Jim?
actually,
Linda.
it's Linda.
Yeah,
And I was asking whether NAUA has what we might call an elevator speech that explains to others in the UU world, of the greater UU world, what distinguishes NAUA from the newer version, shall we say, of the UUA. Is there such a thing as a quick statement that clarifies why we are here together rather than elsewhere?
yeah. Well, I would not want to speak for the whole of Unitarianism, even the whole of those within the UUA. But I do think ours is the statement I like to use is much more memorable and easy to understand. It is this notion that we are, our fundamental commitment is to the inherent worth and dignity of every person and all peoples. And we maintain that dignity within our societies and communities by erecting and maintaining systems of freedom, reason, and tolerance. That's the short version. I would then add that by reason or by freedom, we mean the freedom to express ourselves, to think for ourselves, but also the freedom to engage in the benefits of society without prejudice. By reason, we mean, certainly think well, think rationally, but more importantly, that we trust that you can reason for yourselves. So you don't need a church or a government to tell you what it is you're supposed to believe. That's what we mean by reason. Every person has that ability to think. And finally, where we do disagree, tolerance. This is a very basic low bar. Let's at least live and let live so we can live peacefully together. Those are I think, the fundamental values. And those end up being rooted again in the Enlightenment principles. I didn't make these up. These are, if you study the Enlightenment, you're going to basically say those are pretty much the best summary. There might be a couple of other principles like our belief in our common humanity, a belief in universalism in the sense that there is universal truth. That is, there is objective truth that is true everywhere in the universe, even if we don't grasp it or understand it. That sort of thing. So I'm getting off the rails here and it becomes complicated, but that's why I basically like to narrow it down to the inherent worth and dignity of every person, which we all already know. I think that's the one principle we could all remember. But I like to add, and all peoples, right? People in Gazan people, Palestinian people, right? Ukrainian people, Black people, whatever, gay people, transgender people, whatever it might be, all people deserve respect and dignity. And that's our fundamental. But how do we create that dignity? And that was through those remarkable technologies, social technologies that emerged during the Enlightenment of freedom, reason, and tolerance. So human dignity, freedom, reason, and tolerance in brief.
Wouldn't an enthusiastic UUA participant agree with everything there?
I would hope so.
But you don't think so?
Well, they might agree with it, but are they living by it when they try to silence and cancel people they disagree with?
Okay, good point.
Right. Yeah. So agreeing is one thing, doing is another.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
All right. Looks like Ron.
Yeah. Hi, Todd. Thanks a lot for your talk today. You mentioned briefly that you felt there were forces within the NAUA that were pulling it in the direction of the UUA. Could you elaborate on what you mean?
Yeah, for example, there is an idea that the NAUA should adopt the 7 principles. And I'm not at all against the 7 principles. I think they're a great representation of those liberal values that I've already mentioned. I mean, if you look at the 7 principles, you will see human dignity, freedom, reason, and tolerance at the root of all of those. But it's kind of a strange thing, right? Because those principles were not lost. They didn't go anywhere. They're still yours if you want them. The idea of having them housed in bylaw, in somebody's bylaws, particularly an organization like NAUA, to me transforms them into a creed. That is, they're being treated like a creed, right? I don't have to memorize them. I just have to know that they're there for me to go look at, and that this is the organization that houses them for me. So to me, it becomes a sort of statement of faith that then puts the NAUA on course of believing that's what it's for, that it exists to hold your ideas, to hold your values and articulate them for you. So that's one of the concerns that I have. The other, I think, is you know, and this is a more technical one, but I don't believe that the NAUA should ever raise funds by requiring dues. I think that was a mistake. For years, I've had congregations ask, why should we be giving all this money to the UUA? And as a minister, you'd have to try to explain, to justify these tremendous amounts. So, you know, if you're a small congregation of 20 to 30 people, it might be as much as, you know, $2,000 to $3,000, even $5,000. If you're a larger congregation with hundreds, it could be the equivalent of somebody's salary. Right? It's a lot of money. So how do you justify that? But more importantly, we shouldn't have to. Right? If the UUA is worth that much to our congregations and to us as individuals, we should know why we're contributing that much. And so I think that if you limit NAUA's support to a fixed number, then that's the number you're going to get. If you recognize we are being supported by the goodwill of people who care about us and get value from us, then the onus is upon us as an association to always make sure we are doing our best to connect with you, to connect with your congregations, and to be a meaningful point of support for you. And so I don't want to move into the place where we just say, here, if you want our services, here's what you owe us. Just like in our congregations, right? We don't say you have to give us a specific amount. We ask people to pledge to us based on what they have. And at least in my church, you know, we even have waivers for folks who can't give anything at all. Those would be the two forces that concern me the most. And then Roy.
Thanks, Todd. Thanks for the talk and all. What struck me the most about it was your closing words and how the emphasis seemed to be on you know, the you know, being open to other viewpoints and diverse thoughts and looking at things from different spots. And I think that's so important and so in opposition, if you will, to what's going on in today's world, where we're forced into these bubbles. It seems like people, either purposely or by our own will. So maybe your thoughts on that. Thank you. Thanks a lot.
Yeah, no, you're welcome. Thanks for asking. Yeah, I mean, it's really an important point. It gets back to the idea of tolerance. And right now, especially I think organizations like the UUA and sort of the, if you want to call it the woke mindset, cancel culture, whatever. I mean, I always hate to put a label on it because it's still rather nebulous. None of us agree on what to call it. And it's reductionistic. But whatever that mindset is, it seems to have flipped the idea of tolerance on the head, right? That if you say something somebody disagrees with, you're intolerant, right? It's like, no, if you don't let people say things you disagree with, you're intolerant, right? That's what intolerance is not being able to tolerate different values or challenges to your own beliefs, questions around your own beliefs without becoming hostile and defensive and, whatever the defense mechanisms are. I won't go into them. So I think that's really an important part, right? That I had somebody recently write a letter and say, I'm glad that NAUA is politically neutral. And I wrote back and I said, well, we're not really politically neutral. People have different political opinions and they get to express them. We're politically tolerant. We're tolerant of our difference. I hope we are. That's a tough one for us liberals, right? There are people in our association and amongst liberalism who voted for Donald Trump, for example. I know there are good people, intelligent people that had their reasons for doing so. And I think some of those understandably are going to feel uncomfortable admitting that publicly to some of us. But we need to be able to at least entertain that those folks are with us and that they get to express themselves just as well without us saying, get out, you don't belong here, attacking their character, but listening to their reasons. But we get to disagree. That's the whole point. We get to say things that others will disagree with in respectful ways that enable us to stay together as friends. And if we can't do that, then we are part of the problem, part of the poison that has infected, that's three different metaphors, the entire world at this point. So yeah, Danny.
Thank you, Todd. I've enjoyed what you've just said very much. And I'm coming to this group as somebody who's relatively recently, in the last few years, both been coming out late in life as trans and newly associating with my local UUA congregation. And I have had problems with the politically correct thing that I encountered, because what happened for me is that what was intended to support me did not support me at all. Having a big banner up saying, big flag up in the congregation and saying, we're a friendly congregation, blah, blah. And the people who are in the cancel culture assuring me, oh, everybody thinks like this, which was not true. It was a lie. Set me up for having a way worse time in that congregation than anywhere else I've had as I've come out. And it was unfair to me. It was unfair to the congregation. I just did not like it.
Yeah,
and
well,
I'm wondering, and I am wondering if you have any thoughts about what I can do from my particular position to help instal this.
it's a tough one. The transgender issues around transgenderism, I think, is one of the most divisive, in the country, but also amongst liberals, including I've seen, I know of hostilities that have arisen in NAUA around the topic. Some folks can get very embedded in their ideas. What I would, hope is that you can lead us into discussing this in ways that are honest and tolerant, so that we're not at each other's throats. There are some really interesting questions that the transgenderism has, if you will, brought before us as a society. I think there is no greater archetype in the human psyche than the archetype and the polarization between male and female, right? You see it going all the way back to yin and yang, right? Where there's the divided sides. But you notice each of them has a spot of the other in it, right? So males and females are not two different species, and we're not so unalike. So, one really interesting question, because there are behaviors that are strictly male and strictly female in other species. If you watch turkeys running around, male turkeys running around, for example, there's a lot of them around here this time of year. Their behavior is very different than the females they're trying to impress, and so on. And that's not enculturation, right? That's biology for these animals. So what really are male, what's truly male behavior and truly female behavior, if you will, in humans? And what is cultural overlay? What is cultural stereotype? I think it's one of the most fascinating questions that we could answer about ourselves if we took this opportunity to do that instead of, just splitting apart. And the other thing is what makes us human beings and that sort of thing. And I just think there's a lot of mystery around transgenderism that even folks who are transgender, identify as transgender, haven't fully been able to respond to. And so this is an interesting time for us to, again, bring out the mystical part of ourselves and try to honestly answer these questions, but at the same time, be able to honestly raise concerns. I'm concerned about, folks who are born biologically male participating in female sports, particularly when you hear these stories, at least in the news, about young women who are, being beaten or even injured in some of these sport accidents. So there's just a lot of questions. And those are the things that I'm finding that it's really difficult for us to raise and bring up, even in NAUA, without people getting their feathers ruffled, to say the least. Some people are even walking away angry. So we all need to do that, not just you, Danny. I think all of us need to put these principles, these liberal principles together and say, first, bottom line is we're all human beings. We're all here to love one another and to support one another and to do what we can to best become who we are. We're also here to be able to listen to others and to disagree with one another without being at each other's throats and even separating our friendships over it. So I think that would be probably, again, a long-winded response to the questions you raise. And I'm sorry that you have felt worse off in the church that you were at.
Well, it's because I've had to bear the anger and frustration and from the people who've been othered over the politically corrupt stuff that I never signed on to and I never agreed with in the first place. And people just have assumed because I'm trans that I'm part of that set. And that's been really frustrating.
Yeah. Well, thank you. I think it's such a great opportunity for us today to explore where we're at with that. So thank you. I greatly appreciate it.